Hello everyone. Something I've noticed recently, and I would expect some of you watching this video have also noticed this, is that there are atheists out there who are actually more honest about the facts than a lot of people who profess to be Christians. You ever noticed that? There's a lot of Christians out there who are really, really dishonest with themselves. It's really bad. And you start watching, some of these videos on YouTube where, you got an atheist and you got a Christian, dialoguing, and it's like, oh man. At least this atheist is being honest with himself. You might not agree with him, but you can see he's actually being honest with himself. Where you can tell the Christian, he's just kind of making stuff up and believing what he wants and denying the facts and all this kind of stuff. Isn't that sick? There's a couple of guys that I've sort of, stumbled across on YouTube. And one of them is a fellow by the name of Matt Dillahunty. And I think he hosts, it's called The Atheist Experience. And I don't know if you've ever seen it on YouTube, but Christians, people who think they're Christians anyway, phone in, and they want to stomp all over him. Well, this fellow was actually what he understood to be a born-again Christian in the Baptist tradition, I believe. And he was actually studying in seminary, as I understand it. And he began to, research the Bible and various other things. And he started to have some questions which presented difficulties for him. And they were questions like, well, if the Trinity is true, and then the God of the Old Testament, that's Jesus. And Jesus is killing babies in the flood. And Jesus is ordering Joshua and the boys to go in, and kill every man, woman, and child. I've got a problem with that. And so he has questions about that. That's a legitimate question, isn't it? If you're honest with yourself, that's a legitimate question. How can that be? There's answers. And so this fella became an atheist. Okay. What was his whole faith based on? If you start to think about his testimony about how he, studied this, and something didn't pan out about this for him. This is all of what his faith was based on. In fact, his own interpretation of this, the best interpretation he could come up with. That's fine. His faith was all based on this. As Christians, what's our faith based on? Book? Jesus. This isn't from Jesus. There's another guy named Bart Ehrman. And as I understand it, he's recently became an atheist. And, I've listened to this guy a few times just to see what he's got to say. And I can give him this. This guy's trying to be as honest with himself as he can be. You can see that when you listen to this man. And he started off kind of the same thing. He was a born-again evangelical, not sure what kind, but what he perceived to be born again, what he taught was being born again. And he went, and took theology at Moody, very fundamentalist evangelical college, Wheaton. And he was a professor at some school in North Carolina, I believe it was. I'm not sure what it is. I think he was a professor of New Testament studies or something like that. And he did the same thing. He started looking into this book. And the result of his investigation, he became an atheist. That's what happened. And his approach was a little different than the first guy. He started seeing there were corruptions and people had messed with the manuscripts and stuff like that. And one thing led to another. He's kind of like, I don't know if I can believe this. But again, what was his faith based on? It's based on this. Okay? It's based on this. And then there's kind of another thing you see happening out there in, just out there in the world, I guess. And you see some of it on YouTube, where people who were professing to be Christians became Muslims. And the basic idea there is that, they exchange their faith in this book for faith in another book, the Quran. Same kind of thing. Faith in one book, faith in another book. And what all these people are doing is they're making an assumption that the Christianity out there in mainstream Christianity and the organized churches throughout history, especially from the 4th century onward, is Christianity. And they look at this and how it's Bible-based, and they go, something wrong here. Yeah, there is something wrong there. They're right. Where they were wrong is in their assumptions. The disciples of Jesus do not have a book-based faith. We don't. A lot of people who purport to be Christians do. Even worse, our faith isn't based on our interpretation of this book. Boy, that's a troubling matter, isn't it? Your salvation depends on you getting the right interpretation of this book. Boy, if you don't, God's going to mark your theology test wrong on Judgment Day and you're going to hell. That's basically what people are thinking. How messed up is that? Our faith isn't based on a book. It's based on Jesus Christ, the person. The Bible is not Jesus. The Bible is guys testifying about Jesus. We know God is real. We know Jesus is real. Not because somebody wrote it down in a book. Because a book says so? That's not why. I believe Jesus is real because I met him. I met him. I had a personal encounter with the living Son of God, Jesus Christ. That's why I believe. My faith isn't based on a book or even worse. Did I get the correct interpretation of this book? My faith is based on someone I met, someone I know, someone who knows me. Jesus. Jesus. His sheep hear his voice. Remember in the Gospel of John what Jesus says? We, the Father and I, we will come to make our home in you. How could you not have met God and had a personal encounter with his Son Jesus Christ, if the Father and the Son actually live in you, the crazy part about it all, this tells you that. This testifies about that. If you've met God, the Father will come to make his home in you. If you've met God, it's pretty hard to deny that God exists. If someone has taken you to England and you've seen it with your own human eyes, it's pretty hard to deny that England exists. And you're not going to do something goofy like come back, well, maybe I had an hallucination. Maybe England was a hallucination. Yeah, people have hallucinations, but get serious. Do you think that people who have had personal encounters with God and Jesus Christ, don't think about these things? I did. There's no way that was a hallucination. I could try and deny it all kinds of ways. Not. The disciples of Jesus have Jesus dwelling in them. He lives there. And their faith is based on him, and they walk according to him and his leading. That's what it's based upon. These guys testify about that so that you could have that. You. Not so that you could base your faith upon a bunch of theological ideas you extract from this book. If you interpret it correctly and get the right theology. It's like God's having a theology test on Judgment Day. Do you remember what it says? Jesus, I never knew you. It comes down to whether we know him. That's what our faith is based upon. Do you know him? And do you know who knows him? Those who do what he says. Those who have spent time with Jesus, walking with him and doing what he says. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, not do what I say? What kind of crazy idea is that? Because if you call someone Lord, that means that's your authority, and you're the servant, and he's the Lord, and you do what he say. See Jesus' point? Why would you call me Lord, Lord, not do what I say? He's basically saying it's madness. God didn't create a new religion for men to follow. Okay, now there's this Buddhist religion, and then there's the Hindu religion, and then there's, the Judaism religion. I think I'll give these guys, another 27 books, and they can stick them onto the other books, and we'll create this new religion called Christianity. You think? You think that's what happened? That's not what happened. Our faith isn't based on this book or our interpretation of this book. And that's where guys like Matt Dillahunty, that's where guys like Bart Ehrman went wrong. You see, if they were really born again, they would have met Jesus. They would have encountered the risen Christ. There would have been no doubt in their mind about that reality. And Jesus, the Word of God, reveals God the Father to us. The reality of God the Father. When you have that happen to you, there's going to be no doubt in your mind. And when the Muslims come along saying, our book is better than your book, have faith in our book and follow our book instead of your book, you're going to realize what craziness they're talking about. You're going to realize that because you know Jesus Christ. God bless you.